couple of weeks later, John suggested that I join Magic Alex, Jenny, Donovan and Gypsy on a 2-week holiday in Greece. I told him I didn't want to go without him. Apart from those rare occasions when I had taken Mum and Julian away because he was working, we had never spent holidays apart. "I've got a lot on at the moment and I can't go, but you should. It might cheer you up," he said. I was uncertain, but he persisted, and in the end I decided to go. John was busy writing songs for the Beatles' new album, The Beatles, better known after its release as the White Album. He wrote 13 of the tracks, including Julia, a tribute to his mother, and Good Night for Julian. Cheered by the hope that John might miss me and the prospect of a change, I left for Greece. Julian had gone to stay with Dot's family, and John was lying on our bed when I left. He was in the almost trance-like state I had seen many times before, and barely turned his head to say goodbye. Surprisingly, given my worries about the future of my marriage, it was a lovely holiday. 2 weeks of Greek sun, sea, ouzo, tavernas, and the laughter and companionship of the others raised my spirits. Despite my mistrust of Alex over the Maharishi episode, in Greece I put aside my doubts, as he interpreted, smoothed the way, and behaved in every way like a good friend. By the time we were due to head home, I felt so much better. I had missed John badly and had convinced myself that we could make a fresh start. On the way home, our plane stopped off in Rome, where we had lunch. Wouldn't it be fun if we finished the day with dinner in London, after breakfast in Greece and lunch in Rome, we laughed. Let's get John to join us. Alex suggested I ring him to let him know what time we would be back. I spoke to him briefly. "Hi, darling. I'll be home soon. Can't wait to see you." John's reply sounded normal. "Fine. See you later." Donovan and Gypsy headed home, but Jenny and Alex came with me to Kenwood to see if John fancied dinner out. We arrived at 4 in the afternoon, and immediately I knew something was wrong. The porch light was on, the curtains were still drawn, and everything was silent. There was no Dot to greet me, no Julian bounding through the door, shouting with delight for a hug. What's going on? The front door was unlocked. The 3 of us walked in and began to look for John, Julian and Dot. "Where are you all?" I called, still expecting them to appear from behind a door, laughing at the joke. As I put my hand on the sunroom door, I felt a sudden frisson of fear. I hesitated for a second, then opened it. Inside, the curtains were closed and the room was dimly lit, so it took me a moment to focus. When I did, I froze. John and Yoko were sitting on the floor, cross-legged and facing each other, beside a table covered with dirty dishes. They were wearing the terry-cloth robes we kept in the pool house, so I imagined that they had been for a swim. John was facing me. He looked at me, expressionless, and said, "Oh, hi." Yoko didn't turn around. I blurted out the only thing I could think of. "We're all looking forward to dinner in London after lunch in Rome and breakfast in Greece. Would you like to come?" As I stood in the doorway, rooted to the spot in shock and pain, John said indifferently, "No thanks." I turned and fled. I threw a few things into a bag and ran downstairs again, barely 20 minutes after I had arrived, for what I had hoped would be a loving reunion with John. I got back into the waiting taxi with Jenny and Alex and drove away from my home, leaving John and his lover behind. I was in a daze. My mind seemed to be floating and I couldn't focus on anything other than the vivid image of them together. Every time I saw it, I was overwhelmed by a fresh stab of pain. Yet I couldn't stop myself conjuring it up as I tried to take in the betrayal. Their intimacy had been so powerful that I had felt like a stranger in my own home. I had no memory of the journey with Alex and Jenny, or of arriving that evening at the small house they shared. The next morning I woke with the dreadful realization that my marriage was probably over. I had no idea what to do next. After a couple of days, I knew I had to go home. I was aching to see Julian. John and I might be making a mess of our marriage, but we still had a small son who needed us. I got myself together sufficiently to face John. There had been no word from him, and I had no idea what he was planning. But I needed to find out. I took a long hot bath, tried to make myself look better than I felt, packed up my things, and took a taxi home. Walking in was difficult. I had no idea what I might find. But the house was astonishingly normal. The sun shone, the curtains were drawn back, everything was neat as a pin. Clearly Dot had been hard at work. As I stood wondering who was at home, Julian ran to me and leapt into my arms. It was wonderful to be able to hug him. At that moment John wandered out of the den. "Oh, hi," he said, casually. "Where have you been?" I stared at him. Surely he was joking. But no, he seemed relaxed, normal, even pleased to see me. He came over and planted a kiss on my cheek. Had it all been a nightmare? Or was John truly capable of doing something like that, then dismissing it as unimportant? I knew him so well. But he'd surprised me before with his ability to compartmentalize his life and put aside anything that he didn't want to deal with. But ignoring the fact that I'd found him with Yoko seemed a little like stepping round an elephant in the middle of the drawing room. It was evening before John and I had a chance to talk. I had to steel myself for the confrontation that we would usually avoid, to ask him what was happening with Yoko. "Oh, her," he said, as if surprised that I'd asked. "Nothing, it's not important." "We have to talk, John," I told him. "Please don't pretend that nothing's happening." Eventually we did talk, perhaps more honestly and in more depth than we had since our student days. We talked of our failings and faults, our love for each other, our hopes and dreams. John talked again about his other women and insisted that Yoko was no more important than they had been. "It's you I love, Sin," he said. "I love you now more than I ever have before." That night we went to bed and made love, and my bruised heart felt lighter. It wouldn't be easy to forget what had happened. But if it really was in the past, well, I would try. The John I had spent the evening with and in whose arms I lay was so completely different from the man who had stared at me impassively as he sat with Yoko in the sunroom that it was hard to accept that they were the same person. Had he been on drugs? I knew he was dabbling again since his disenchantment with the Maharishi. Only drugs could explain how he had behaved.